The Battle of Isandlwana on the 22nd of January 1879 was the first major encounter in the Anglo-Zulu War between the British Empire and the Zulu Kingdom. 11 days after the British commenced their invasion of Zululand in South Africa, a Zulu force of some 20,000 warriors attacked a portion of the British main column consisting of about 1,800 British, colonial and native troops and perhaps 400 civilians. The Zulus were equipped mainly with the traditional assegai iron spears and cowhide shields, but also had a number of muskets and old rifles, though they were not formally trained in their use. The British and colonial troops were armed with the state-of-the-art Martini Henry breech-loading rifle and two 7-pounder mountain guns deployed as field guns, as well as a rocket battery. Despite her vast disadvantage in weapons technology, the numerically superior Zulus ultimately overwhelmed the poorly led and badly deployed British, killing over 1,300 troops, including all those out on the forward firing line. The Zulu army suffered around 1,000 killed. The battle was a decisive victory for the Zulus and caused the defeat of the first British invasion of Zululand. The British Army had suffered its worst defeat against an indigenous, technologically vastly inferior foe. Isandhlwana resulted in the British taking a much more aggressive approach in the Anglo-Zulu War, leading to a heavily reinforced second invasion and the destruction of King Cetshwayo's hopes of a negotiated peace. Background: following the imperialist scheme by which Lord Carnarvon had brought about Confederation in Canada through the 1867 British North America Act, it was thought that a similar plan might succeed in South Africa, and in 1877 Sir Henry Bartle Frere was appointed as High Commissioner for Southern Africa to instigate the scheme. Some of the obstacles to such a plan were the presence of the independent states of the South African Republic and the Kingdom of Zululand, both of which the British Empire would attempt to overcome by force of arms. Bartle Frere, on his own initiative, without the approval of the British government and with the intent of instigating a war with the Zulu, had presented an ultimatum to the Zulu king Cetshwayo on the 11th of December 1878, with which the Zulu king could not possibly comply. When the ultimatum expired a month later, Bartle Frere ordered Lord Chelmsford to proceed with a pre-planned invasion of Zululand. Prelude: Lord Chelmsford, the commander-in-chief of British forces during the war, initially planned a five-pronged invasion of Zululand, consisting of over 15,000 troops in 5 columns and designed to encircle the Zulu army and force it to fight, as he was concerned that the Zulus would avoid battle. Lord Chelmsford settled on 3 invading columns, with the main centre column, now consisting of some 7,800 men, comprising the previously called No. 3 column, commanded by the colonel of the 24th Richard Glynn, and Durnford's No. 2 column, under his direct command. He moved his troops from Pietermaritzburg to a forward camp at Helpmekar, past Greytown. On the 9th of January 1879 they moved to Rorke's, and early on the 11th of January commenced crossing the Buffalo River into Zululand. The backbone of the British force under Lord Chelmsford consisted of 12 regular infantry companies, 6 each of the 1st and 2nd Battalions, 24th Regiment of Foot, which were hardened and reliable troops. In addition, there were approximately 2,500 local African auxiliaries of the native contingent, many of which were exiled or refugee Zulu. They were led by European officers but considered generally of poor quality by the British, as they were prohibited from using their traditional fighting technique and inadequately trained in the European method, as well as being indifferently armed. Also, there were some irregular colonial cavalry units, and a detachment of artillery consisting of 6 field guns and several Congreve rockets. Adding on wagon drivers, camp followers and servants, there were more than 4,000 men in the No. 3 column, not including Durnford's No. 2 column. Because of the urgency required to accomplish their scheme, Bartle Frere and Chelmsford began the invasion during the rainy season. This had the consequence of slowing the British advance to a crawl. The Zulu army, while a product of a warrior culture, was essentially a militia force which could be called out in time of national danger. It had a very limited logistical capacity and could only stay in the field a few weeks before the troops would be obliged to return to their civilian duties. Zulu warriors were armed primarily with assegai thrusting spears, known in Zulu as Iklwa, Nokareri clubs, some throwing spears and shields made of cowhide. The Zulu warrior, his regiment and the army drilled in the personal and tactical use and coordination of this weapon system. Some Zulus also had old muskets and antiquated rifles stockpiled, a relatively few of which were carried by Zulu Mpai. However, their marksmanship was very poor quality and supply of powder and shot dreadful. Maintenance non-existent and attitude towards firearms summed up in the observation that the generality of Zulu warriors, however, would not have firearms, the arms of a coward, as they said, for they enable the poltroon to kill the brave without awaiting his attack. The British had timed the invasion to coincide with the harvest, intending to catch the Zulu warrior farmers dispersed. Fortuitously for Cetshwayo, the Zulu army had already begun to assemble at Ulundi, as it did every year for the first fruits ceremony when all warriors were duty-bound to report to their regimental barracks near Ulundi. Cetshwayo sent the 24,000-strong main Zulu Mpai from near present-day Ulundi, on the 17th of January, across the White Umfolozi River with the following command to his warriors. March slowly, attack at dawn or meet up the Red soldiers. On the 18th, some 4,000 warriors were detached from the main body to attack Charles Pearson's No. 1 column near Esso. The remaining 20,000 Zulus camped at the Isifezi at Kanda. On the 19th the main force arrived and camped near Babanango Mountain, then moved the next day to a camp near Isifezi Mountain. Finally, on the 21st they moved into the Gwebani Valley, where they remained concealed, planning to attack the British on the 23rd. But they were discovered by a scouting party on the 22nd of January. Under the command of Nt Shigwe Okamahole, the Zulu army had reached its position in easy stages. It marched in two columns within sight of each other, but a few miles apart to prevent a surprise attack. They were preceded by a screening force of mounted scouts supported by parties of warriors 200 to 400 strong tasked with preventing the main columns from being sighted. The speed of the Zulu advance compared to the British is marked. The Zulu Mpai had advanced over 80 kilometers in 5 days, while Chelmsford had only advanced slightly over 16 kilometers in 10 days. The British under Chelmsford pitched camp at Isandhlwana on the 20th of January, but did not follow standing orders to entrench. No laager was formed. Chelmsford did not see the need for the laager, stating, "It would take a week to make," but the chief reason for the failure to take defensive precautions appears to have been that the British command severely underestimated the Zulu capabilities. The experience of numerous colonial wars fought in Africa was that the massed firepower of relatively small bodies of professional European troops, armed with modern firearms and artillery, and supplemented by local allies and levies, would march out to meet the natives whose ragged, badly equipped armies would put up a brave struggle, but in the end would succumb. Chelmsford believed that a force of over 4,000, including 2,000 British infantry armed with Martini Henry rifles, as well as artillery, had more than sufficient firepower to overwhelm any attack by Zulus armed only with spears, cowhide shields and a few firearms such as Brown Bess muskets. Indeed, with a British force of this size, it was the logistical arrangements which occupied Chelmsford's thoughts, rather than any fear that the camp might be attacked. His main concern was managing the huge number of wagons and oxen required to support his forward advance. Once he had established the camp at Isandhlwana, Chelmsford sent out 2 battalions of the native contingent to scout ahead. They skirmished with elements of a Zulu force which Chelmsford believed to be the vanguard of the main enemy army. Such was the overconfidence in British military training and firepower that he divided his force, taking about 2,500 men, including half of the British infantry contingent, and set out to find the main Zulu force with the intention of bringing them to battle, so as to achieve a decisive victory. It never occurred to Chelmsford that the Zulus he saw were diverting him from their main force. Chelmsford left behind 5 companies, around 70 to 80 fighting men in each, of the 1st Battalion and 1 stronger company of around 150 men from the 2nd Battalion of the 24th to guard the camp, under the command of Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pullein. Pullen's orders were to defend the camp and wait for further instructions to support the general as and when called upon. Pullein also had around 500 men of the native contingent and approximately 200 local mounted irregulars. He also had 2 artillery pieces, with around 70 men of the Royal Artillery. In total, some 1,300 men and 2 guns were left to defend the camp. Pullein, left in command of a rear position, was an administrator with no experience of frontline command on a campaign. Nevertheless, he commanded a strong force, particularly the 6 veteran regular infantry companies, which were experienced at colonial warfare. The mounted vedettes, cavalry scouts, patrolling some 11 kilometers from camp, reported at 7 a.m. that groups of Zulus, numbering around 4,000 men, could be seen. Further reports arrived to Pullein during the early morning, each reporting movements, both large and small, of Zulus. There was speculation among the officers whether these troops were intending to march against Chelmsford's rear or towards the camp itself. Around 10:30 a.m., Colonel Anthony Durnford arrived from Rorke's Drift with 5 troops of the native horse and a rocket battery. This brought the issue of command to the fore, because Durnford was senior and by tradition would have assumed command. However, he did not overrule Pullein's dispositions, and after lunch he quickly decided to take to the initiative and move forward to engage a Zulu force, which Pullein and Durnford judged to be moving against Chelmsford's rear. Durnford asked for a company of the 24th, but Pullein was reluctant to agree since his orders had been specifically to defend the camp. Chelmsford had underestimated the disciplined, well-led, well-motivated and confident Zulu. The failure to secure an effective defensive position, the poor intelligence on the location of the main Zulu army, Chelmsford's decision to split his force in half, and the Zulus' tactical exploitation of the terrain and the weaknesses in the British formation, all combined to prove catastrophic for the troops at Isandhlwana. In contrast, the Zulus responded to the unexpected discovery of their camp with an immediate and spontaneous advance, even though the Indunas would lose control over the advance. The warriors' training allowed the Zulu troops to form their standard attack formation on the run. Their battle line deployed in reverse of its intended order.